Good afternoon.
Scotty. Oh, mate, you're sounding like, have you been doing some phone sex work? Is that why you've got the huskiness in your voice? Or
Well,
what's going on?
If only. I actually had a...
1-900 call Scotty.
Lovely. I actually had a patient on Saturday say, damn, your voice is sexy. And I said, well, it wasn't through trying. This is the end result of getting my voice back post being choked savagely last week at my grading seminar. Now, not just once, because I'm a slow learner. I got choked by two different high-ranking guys, one with a type of loop collar choke and the other with this awesome Ezekiel choke. Good lessons. Don't leave your head there.
Isn't that a case of, hey, tap?
Yeah, I did. Well, I tapped with the first one, and I actually got out of the Ezekiel, but I thought I was good. And, like 2-3 hours later, my throat starts getting a bit sore because the bruising had kicked in at that stage. And for 2 days, I basically, Sunday, Monday, I had no voice. And because obviously, as the listeners out there will probably know, I talk a lot. And so the voice was getting fairly strained.
Well, that's the problem with this podcast, mate. I'm certainly not going to be carrying your weight, so I'm just going to ask questions, and you're just going to have to man up and talk with your husky. Have you seen Book of Mormon?
I have not seen Book of Mormon. I've heard it's pretty good.
There's a good line in it. And I'm going to man up all over the place. You should yeah, man. Just man up all over the place.
Well, I understand that's what you were up to yesterday.
That's right. Well, I manned down for the first round and then manned up for the so yeah, first round BJJ, very first ever comp, might I add. So
well done. Here's my golf clap.
But it was funny because the nerves weren't as bad as I had thought, because I'd done a lot of karate competitions back in the day at a higher level, so that had sort of mentally prepped me for a little in-house comp where I was like, okay, it's stressful, but it's not too stressful. But sort of leading up to the event, I could feel my body starting to race, and the sympathetics are kicking in, and I did my deep breathing, and that would calm down. But then everything would start to stir up again.
Kick off, yeah.
But it was funny because it was all that fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So I get to the warm up maps, Matt, and the guy that I was my opponent in the first round that I was so worried about because I'd heard he was really good. We got to talking, and it turns out that I went to school with him, and we were long-term mates from way back. The instant that was sort of like, oh, look, I know he's going to be better than me, and I'm probably going to end up choked, but substantially less stressed at that point. So yeah, stress is all about perception.
Fully.
Try and envisage my opponent as a long-term friend to see if I can mitigate some of that stress that kicks in.
That's a good idea. My first comp, I remember very vividly. I got bounced within 30 seconds straight over the guy's hip. Literally, bang. What the hell? How did I get here? And up again, because he was much better at his takedowns, and I went into aggressively giving him all my body weight. Got up, started again, he did it, bang. Like I went down 3 times in the first minute before I kind of got my wits about me. And fortunately for me, that one ended in him being choked face down on the mat.
Ah, beautiful.
Yeah, but like it wasn't going my way, I tell you.
Before we lose too many more listeners who aren't interested in BJJ at all, this is a prelude to the conversation of the day, which is all about energy systems and mitochondria and DNA inheritance. But one more story, 'cause I think you'd appreciate this because it does highlight how, at my core, I am a little bit of an asshole. And the guy that I had in the second round is we trained together, so like I knew him. And he mentioned, earlier in the week that he had a really sore neck, and he tapped out in his first round from neck pressure because his neck was quite sore. So the first thing that I did was just to try and crank his neck as much as possible because I wanted to win. I was like, I know there's a weakness there, buddy. I've got insider info, so I'm going to capitalize on that. But to his credit, and this is, I think, something that's going to sort of prelude into the conversation about mitochondrial energy systems and DNA inheritance and all that sort of thing. I had a what do they call it? Is this, I think it's just like a fist choke or the knuckle choke. I don't know the technical term for it. Basically burying a fist in one side of his neck and then yanking on the collar on the other side to try and close down. So this guy was going blue in the face, and I was tugging and punching into his neck and I'm pretty strong. And I was doing that as hard as I possibly could, which probably means my technique wasn't great, but hard as I could for 40 seconds. And sort of 10 seconds into this, I'm thinking he's got to go. He's got to, come on, tap, 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 tap. And he didn't. And it was an amazing ability to function and at sort of a low oxygenated state. I was definitely, putting some pressure on the arteries going up to his brain because he was turning a beautiful shade of purple. But it was interesting watching how people can still put out a fair bit of energy in a low oxygen state. Whereas for me, I have got bucket loads of strength for about 15 seconds. And then as soon as I get into that low oxygenated state,
Bang. Yeah.
I turn into a kitten. And which is, so yeah, this is the interesting thing. So my, because I saw a paper a couple of weeks back, and I think you posted it on your Facebook page, and I saved it because I thought, that'd be a good one to talk about. But it was showing that new findings sort of going against what we traditionally knew, that the mitochondria, which is, if people have been listening to this podcast for a while now, you should know what mitochondria are.
The powerhouse.
Powerhouse of each cell. So yeah, energy production was originally thought to be a predominantly maternal inherited thing, and that is something that I always thought to be the case. My dad was a boxer back in the day, so he could put out high energy for days, 10 rounds, 15, and this is old school boxing when they went ridiculous lengths. But I've just never had that sort of cardio, much more of sort of my mum's energy levels, which is high but then bottoms out quickly. And then when I finally read that perhaps we inherit some mitochondria from dad, challenged the original thoughts on how that stuff works.
I loved it.
All right, that's my rant.
Yeah.
Scotty, take it away.
Well,
how is daddy's genes affecting my energy?
It's a little... How's it work? Well, I looked at it and I read the clickbait cash line on it and went, wow, my goodness, this takes the biscuit. Everything that we've built kind of science on for the last 50 years has just been blown out of the water. And sadly, like with the breast biome, these things are never, it's never quite as exciting as it seems. So yes, there is now evidence to show that we are inheriting DNA from the father, but it's more in a kind of chimeric. There was a trippy sort of accident that occurred along the way, and some of the DNA got messed up in there, rather than it being, look, we've just been missing this whole thing all the way along. And so in some people's systems who happen to have some very interesting difficulties in the midst of their kind of the pregnancy, some of the male DNA actually gets in there and activates and switches on in some of the cells. So it's not even in all of the cellular lines. Now, I was kind of hoping that this might be true, and like my mum doesn't again have the same degree of energy powerhouse, and I have a fair bit more, so it doesn't really explain a lot of things. And I sort of hope that my kids get kind of more my energy, and without offense out there, my wife doesn't have the same energy output that I do. She's got a lot of stamina, but she doesn't have the same brute force and ignorance that I do. And so I kind of hope that my girls get some of that kind of oomph and strength and power that came through on my side. Now, maybe it's not the DNA from the mitochondria that did it. And again, this is kind of where the human being's excitement really gets interesting, because you've got that mitochondrial DNA, which produces all the energy everywhere in the body. And then you've got a whole lot of energy, and there's an interplay between the mitochondrial DNA and the nuclear DNA for the production of the energy complexes. And so it's not really as reliant only on the mitochondrial DNA for pure energy production as one once thought. Further to that, regardless of whether it's dad's DNA getting messed up in there or mum's DNA only, if you get like poor production of, say, coenzyme Q10 or PQQ, or you don't have enough ribose, you're in a whole world of hurt, regardless of how great your DNA actually is. And so one of the big things that I've been looking at this week, which is why I mentioned to you about the idea. So I've got this great new word. If people out there will have heard of it and some won't. D-ribose. And D-ribose is my new favorite thing. I've started to take it today as it first arrived. And it's really, really useful for decreasing ischemic damage and reperfusion injury. So areas of the body that have had a decline in oxygen supply will have a decline in mitochondrial function. And as soon as those areas get a big flow of oxygen from the blood supply coming back, the mitochondrial start ramping up their activity, and they leak like we spoke about last time. And all that leakage releases massive amounts of oxidative stress, and that just damages everything in this massive cascade, and we get what's called a reperfusion injury. So, back about 91, the medics were doing some testing on people who were going to have surgery for ischemic heart disease, etc. And they were looking at testing what would make them perform better. And so unsupplemented people were taking about 10 days to actually recover from surgery post-ischemic heart disease. And with D-ribose at about 3.5 to 5 grams dosage, they were taking 1 to 2 days to recover.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so that's huge. Absolutely huge. And so what it appears to be, and this one gets really trippy for me in the grand scheme of things, and I found it more exciting than, unfortunately, whether my dad's DNA is actually in my mitochondria. But that's funny. The effect of it and the importance of it not only affects the mitochondria, but it changes the way I started thinking about a whole bunch of different diseases, including things like gout. So when people start overusing their energy, so they're not replenishing enough because of something like poor sleep or overstress or over-outputted, what starts to occur is you can't make enough ATP quick enough out of the normal citric acid cycles. So what the body does is it takes a molecule of ADP, or adenosine diphosphate, and a molecule of AMP, adenosine monophosphate, and jams them together, and you get a molecule of ATP out of it. But you start losing the purines, the riboses that make up your DNA and your adenosines, etc. Now, in those situations, what we think of as gout is, oh, look, this person's overeating rich food, including things like beer and wine and alcohol, so rich alcohols. Alcohol, you got to keep in mind, is non-thermogenic, so it gets burnt while producing no muscle energy whatsoever. So basically it causes you to lose and block the citric acid cycle and the electron transport chains, hence you feel worse the next day and you've got all those pains and aches all over the place. But you basically start chewing through your ATP, have nothing to replace it, and you've got to keep making energy. So you start jamming your ADP, AMP together, and you start losing purines, which is what we see in gout. So all that excessive inflammation in the joints and the tissue and the aches and pains is most likely that we've lost massive amounts of our energy production because we were trying to survive. We've got a spill out of purines that is being lost to the cycle, and that we can actually fix a lot of this by increasing ribose in the system, which is a really cheap supplement that you can get all over the place.
Okay, fascinating. Because the moment you said like ischemic conditions or mop-ups, I straight away thought, stroke, concussions, or absolutely nitty-gritty. But I mean, that would have any impact from compartment syndrome in the arms or leg, all the. Geez, that sounds like almost a cure-all.
Well, it's kind of one of them. It's one of those really important things, along with CoQ10 and PQQ, that just make the mitochondria work. And as everyone out there might be hearing at this moment, I'm really excited about the direction that mitochondria are taking me in my kind of studies, because if we don't actually love and nourish our mitochondria, we just start creating oxidative stress all over the place, and anything can get damaged at that moment. Now, if that's like nervous system tissue, well, you start getting TND, transneuronal degeneration kickoffs going on. And so you can get, muscle spasms and clonus and all sorts of horrifying things at that moment. Now, if we support the mitochondria more effectively, we can actually decrease the amount of suffering the human being is actually doing, like post-exercise, which is why I sent you the thought about getting straight into the HBOT, filling up with ribose, a bit more carnitine, some coenzyme Q10 and PQQ. Now, PQQ, just in case anyone out there is wondering what I'm talking about, is a really interesting type of antioxidant derivative that's part of the coenzyme cycle, and is actually considered to be stardust. It's actually extraterrestrial in origin. And the suggestion is that we got this extraterrestrial stardust kind of blowing up in a solar storm or a meteorite or something, and it punched in and it kind of interacted with like a single cellular organism in the primordial soup umpteen billion years ago. And it's actually what helped kick off the ability for our systems to increase their complexity at that moment in time. And without it, we wouldn't be the interesting creatures that we are, sitting here rationalizing, says the brain.
Magic stardust.
Yeah, I loved it. It's been the coolest thing I've read.
So just so I can get the mechanism in my head right.
Yep.
So in the event of an ischemic crisis where there's a demand for energy that's not being met either through poor nutrition or whatever the case may be. But at that point in time, you go from the normal mechanisms of creating ATP to the equivalent of getting a semi-truck and a normal car to run into each other to create a mangled supercar that is a bit energetic, but the consequence of that is damaging the molecule, and then
ultimately, but the what it's doing is actually making ATP. It's just making out of a really inefficient method. So when you're doing it in a non-oxygenated fashion, you're building up lactic acid, which is damaging to the system as well. But further, if you don't have the building blocks, you take whatever you've got, the stuff that you want to actually keep. Sort of like in investment, you can kind of eat your capital or you spend the money you made from the capital. Well, in this case, we're talking about the human being actually spending their capital, so they've got nothing to replenish, and at some point, it's going to get bad.
Gotcha. So ischemic injury, lack of supply to the area, you're going to break down the surrounding tissue to keep the area as a whole alive.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, what seems to occur, say in like stroke or a blockage, is that you get a nidus of damage that the cells die, and around that nidus you get a ring of hibernating cells. So originally we thought all those cells had died, but as it turns out, those cells are actually pretty well in a sleep mode, and they can be brought back to life. And that's what occurs. That's the area that gets damaged when you get the oxygen supply back. Now, if you pre-dose the person with ribose, the oxidative stress and leakage doesn't occur. Now, ribose is shown and is considered by some of the research to be the kind of the rate-limiting step for tissue to generate mitochondria. So there are specific genetic conditions that are showing that if the production of ribose is really poor in the fetus and therefore the infant, the muscle tissue is really, really low energy and low mitochondrial content, and that this can actually be helped by treating with the D-ribose. Now,
interesting.
At the same point, coenzyme Q10 and PQQ are also massively important for energy production and help shuttle off energy through the four complexes in the mitochondria. And if you get starved of coenzyme Q10 and then leading on to ubiquinol and PQQ, you actually start to leak energy and leak electrons, creating the oxidative stress and damage. And this is where, and what they consider, the negative impacts of things like statins appears to be, and why we get...
I was just about to bring that up. So the statins interfering with the absorption of CoQ10 from dietary supplements, affecting everything.
Not there. So what a statin does is it actually blocks an enzyme called HMG-CoA, which is the major rate-limiting step in the production of coenzyme Q10. So you can get around the problem by supplementing coenzyme Q10 consistently, and preferably in the form of ubiquinol. My preference is actually taking a combined supplement that actually has the ubiquinol and straight CoQ10, because they do slightly different things, and you kind of want both, because some of the theory about these things occurred because we went, coenzyme Q10 is a really good antioxidant. We need lots of antioxidants to soak these things up. Now, the answer is we don't. We need building blocks for the electron transport chain and the bucket brigade. So you don't need excessive amounts of antioxidants. Every time we've tried treating with high doses of antioxidants, we've basically started killing people, is ultimately what it comes down to. All the experiments we've done in the last 20 years, high dose vitamin A for the smokers rather, ended in the study being abandoned early because we were actually killing them quicker. What occurs when you put large amounts of excessive antioxidants in is you actually blockade the normal processes such as the NF-kappa B and all of your natural antioxidant molecules. Now, your naturally endogenously produced molecules such as superoxide dismutase and several others are actually much more powerful. They're like 1 million free radical soaks per second per enzyme versus like vitamin C, 1, coenzyme Q10, 1. So we don't want them to be out of the normal range. What you want is plenty of them to make the cycle operate, because if the cycle is operating, you can keep producing energy and you can keep the mitochondria actually working to provide the neuron and the tissue to function. And so the damage occurs when the mitochondria are failing and nothing is keeping that cycle working, because the body will do whatever it can to protect you anyway. So as soon as it starts to fail, it goes to its fallback, less efficient mechanism, and then it goes to a lower level of crap service still, right up until it gasps its last breath, so to speak. So
gotcha.
You need...
So what's the mechanism? So if that's the mechanism that is occurring, let's say for CoQ10, and is it a similar one for D-ribose? Like, why are we running short on D-ribose in our sort of natural, healthy everyday diet?
I like the way you put that, healthy everyday diet.
Yes. Well, I wanted to give you a suitably. So let's
give me a soapbox that I can stand on here.
Let's rule out the obvious ones, like, well, if you're eating Maccas 3 times a day, then of course you're going to be fucked. But so if you're living a reasonably healthy life, why are we falling short on D-ribose?
So there's a bunch of different reasons. D-ribose is actually produced naturally in the human body every day, and it comes from food, specifically from animal sources of food. So
nice.
Okay, so you can produce it from anything that's got glucose, but from a dietary factor, D-ribose comes from your eggs, chicken, fish, shellfish, etc., in the most high amounts. And then the body makes it out of glucose, and it's part of the pentose 5-phosphate pathways. Now, it simply comes down to things like if I'm overstressed, overexerting, and I can't produce enough, because it's a rate-limited thing. You can produce a certain amount. Now, if you are more tired and poorly sleeping, so stress, mesencephalic hyperactivation, when you're meant to produce 1,000 molecules and you only slept half the time, so you only produced 500, and then you did 800 units of work for the day, you're going to get into debt. And as soon as you start getting into debt, you start having to compensate, and then this becomes a slow-moving downward spiral that no one comes out of.
So that's a case of the body's doing the right thing, but we're genetically designed to thrive in everything except modern
Very
life.
different. Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha.
So we know that
burning the candle at six ends is why we need to supplement with these, rather than a lack of absorption.
Correct.
In our diet.
And the benefits of it is, as a 5 molecule sugar, 5 carbon sugar, it doesn't affect insulin, it doesn't affect blood sugar. So people with diabetes out there and things like type 1 diabetes will not be harmed or damaged in any way from taking this. And especially in something like autoimmune type 1 diabetes, where they are quite likely to have reperfusion injuries and energy production issues, D-ribose might be an absolute godsend. Now, I haven't read enough on it saying this, but logic says that, someone who's got diabetic ulcers and is getting poor blood supply to the extremities, these people are going to get a real kick, quite literally, out of putting D-ribose back in to make the mitochondria work at a much more operative level. So,
interesting.
At this moment...
I mean, he comes back to sort of like anything that supports mitochondrial health is going to be good for you. So, I mean, you can rattle off a whole bunch of conditions from depression, stroke, diabetic ulcers, autoimmune issue. I mean, I'm having trouble thinking of a single thing where D-ribose wouldn't be helpful.
That's exactly what I've read so far. There isn't any situation, and it won't harm you apart from, well, look, if you are a really efficient producer and you're sleeping really well and you're not overflogging yourself with exercise, you might not need it, and then you might lose some money by throwing $50 a month at something you didn't really need. But where a lot of the research actually has come in from is from like endurance cyclists, endurance runners, and bodybuilders. Bodybuilders are really good for this stuff because it gives them more muscle pump. The more mitochondria you have in your skeletal muscle. Yeah. I love it.
Chasing that pump.
So, yeah, unlike, say, creatine, it doesn't give you the same sort of pump volume that you might do with, taking that in. It's more you get thicker muscle fibers and greater strength gains, etc., by sticking it in. Now, why I'm interested in it, obviously, if people have listened to some of the earlier podcasts, I mentioned that I actually have a congenital valve fault in my heart, and this has caused a degree of cardiac enlargement and a degree of it's not quite an aneurysm, but an enlargement in the vessel size of my aorta as it comes off the heart. Now, none of that situation, to my mind, sounds like a very good idea. And fundamentally, if I can decrease the risk of ischemic loss in any of my cardiac tissue, make my cardiac tissue work more efficiently, provide more mitochondrial substrates, and I get more puff, one way or the other, look, I'm signed up. $50 a month is a minimal price to pay for that one to avoid, I face the fact that I'm likely to have surgery at some point in the next 10, 20 years, but realistically, I want to dodge that bullet until they are so crisp and pristine and, micro laser nanobot fixing my heart and stuff that,
Sounds good.
I'm sort of hopeful that, because, we're bucket loads better 20 years from 20 years in the past to where we are now. So if I can kind of miss another 10 years, 20 years of development and actually get to a later point and still really be in good condition, that's got to be a much smarter way of kind of running through it. And again, Dad didn't have any problems with his heart at kind of his passing. And so hopefully his mitochondria that might have been mixed up could show up as a positive.
Fingers crossed for you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
As far as another reason to boost mitochondrial health, specifically from a cardiac health point of view, is not muscle tissue the most dense mitochondrial muscle fiber we've got?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And that's exactly why they were looking at how do they make it work more effectively, and why my thought process is let's kick into that. And especially continuing on sort of in that way where, coenzyme Q10 and the mitochondria are so important for things like atrial fibrillation and thinning the blood. And so the thought process for coenzyme Q10 is it actually can have a blood thinning effect, and some of its effects on things like vitamin K's ability to affect clotting factors. So, the coenzyme Q10 appears to actually inhibit warfarin, but it doesn't have the same negative impact on some of the other like Plavix or the newer model blood thinners. So just as a disclaimer out there, if anyone's listening to this who's taking warfarin, just be aware that there could be some interactions with coenzyme Q10, and you need to be kind of thinking about that if you're deciding to take it. Speak to your healthcare professional. Don't just go, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea." It might be. It might really be the right thing. But if you're on warfarin, your blood may get a bit thick and you could have a stroke or something bad happen. So don't just run off and self-medicate.
So, in summary,
Yeah.
everything that we want to do to boost mitochondrial health. D-ribose sounds like it's a phenomenal supplement.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to look at CoQ10 and then, D-ribose, everything from if you've got any sort of cardiac issue running in the family.
Yep.
You want to be on that. Any sort of, stroke or, Alzheimer's, dementias in the family. You
Correct.
Want to be on D-ribose.
That's exactly my
thoughts. If you're involved with exercise in any way, shape or form, you want to be on D-ribose. Like it's that's good.
Yeah, and the research actually on
Get those
CoQ10
mitochondria healthy.
shows that it may be helpful against neurodegenerative diseases such as ALS, amyotrophic sclerosis, Huntington's, and different forms of ataxia, and that these diseases actually show a decreased level of CoQ10 in the patient's muscles. Now, I don't really know whether that is a cause or an effect, but when they actually supplement these people, including people with Friedreich's ataxia, the mitochondria start to improve and their behaviors start to improve at the same time.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So I found that quite cool. There's
quite cool.
a particular compound in the mitochondria in Friedreich's ataxia called frataxin. And you actually, when you supplement these people, they actually get an improvement in, or a lessening, it appears, of the amount of frataxin that's actually being produced. And this is just with oral supplementation. Of note, there's also a bioenergetic effect of CoQ10 supplementation in Parkinson's disease, and you can restore the complex 1 of the mitochondria to normal function by supplementing it in these people. And you get largely normal energy output, which means that if it's the mitochondrial deficiency that's producing some of the symptoms and the muscle shaking, so to speak, which logically makes sense, you might actually get some improvement, at least for a period of time. And, let's face it, at the end of the day, unless the person's on warfarin, I cannot harm someone with coenzyme Q10. It's an essential for life nutrient. It's the definition of one of the vitamins, and it's now kind of being considered it, because while you can produce it, a lot of people are shown to be unable to produce enough of it over the course of their life. Hence, we need to supplement it. And so, assuming they don't have warfarin in the system and therefore it's not being interfered with, supplementing coenzyme Q10 in a Parkinson's patient is a very safe, very effective way of trying to delay the onset of any of that degeneration.
Beautiful. Final question, mate, and then I'll let you go. So, the one thought that, again, supplementing with something that your body produces, do we run the risk of your body seeing that there's a surplus of D-ribose running in your system and then naturally starting to shutting down its own production of D-ribose, so you're then forced to take D-ribose for the rest of your life?
Does not appear to be, no. So
Beautiful.
All you're doing, you're still producing it. All you're doing is topping up the gap between how much you should produce if you had it perfect.
Gotcha.
And again, there seems to be, to some degree, age-induced, stress-induced, crappy blue light source at night induced, too much cell phone and screen time induced. So all the things that help us not repair properly cause the issues.
So it's going to be very hard to supplement to the point where you've got a surplus of D-ribose running around your system with modern-day stressful life.
That's what the actual the research that I've read says. Let me put out my disclaimer. I'm very open to the fact in next week, next year, etc., research will come out that validates everything I said was total bunkum, and I'm going to sit here and talk to you and say, hey, like a year ago, we had that conversation about PQQ and ribose, etc. Look, all crap. Total lie. I'm really sorry about that. And I'll be big enough to admit it as soon as I find something that's more valid and more referenced and researched,
That's just staying up with the research.
Yeah, basically. So anything's possible, but currently, ribose helps make D-ribose nucleic acid. So it is an essential for life nutrient that you cannot live without. Your body is going to keep producing bucket loads. As you age and decline, you will make less of it. So if you keep it up, you'll produce more energy, you'll keep your mitochondria working at a higher level, and you should suffer less.
Well, in that case, I might add that to my list of supplements and see if I get superpowers.
Yeah, good. That's absolutely my hope, to be fair. I'd like to get less puffed out. I can still keep up with the 20-something-year-olds in my jiu-jitsu classes, but I note that I still suffer more afterwards than they do.
Yeah, that's well, I'm lucky that I'm rolling at 6 a.m., so it usually seems to be dad o'clock. So the 20-year-olds aren't really there yet. They're all having a sleep in while people with kids are up and doing the work before things get crazy.
Yeah, I like that idea,
mate. Beautiful as always.
Thank you.
Love speaking with you. I think we'll let our listeners go now.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. To learn more from Dr. Scott, visit our site at optihuman.com.au.